The true measure of leadership is influence. Nothing more, nothing less. The law of intuition gives you a head start on everybody else. And the law of navigation says anyone can steer the ship, but it takes a leader to chart the course. It is with great joy that I spend a few hours with you teaching you the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And I welcome every one of you here today because this lecture has potential to help you to become a better leader and to change your life. And somebody asked me recently, they said, John, how long did it take you to write the book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership? And I know I shocked them because I looked at him and said, about 20 years. Now, people know I'm slow, but that's really slow. What I was really saying to them is a book like The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership has to be birthed with a lot of experience. In other words, there are some books you don't write real quickly. There are some books you just kind of let them marinate and let them simmer so that you can truly bring out the laws. And the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership was kind of formed in not only the process of time, but about 5 years ago, I sat down one time and I asked myself, in leading people for 20, 25 years, what lessons have I learned about leadership? What principles, what thoughts have I learned that really would make a difference? And what I came to the conclusion was this, that there are a lot of wonderful leadership thoughts, there are a lot of leadership principles. But when you start boiling down to laws, there are just a few of them. And I would like to talk to you about the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, and I would like to begin in your workbook by sharing with you how these laws were qualified. How did we qualify these laws? How did we turn around and say, okay, these are more than principles, these are more than leadership thoughts, these are truly laws. And I'm going to share with you in your notes the qualifying test to becoming a leadership law. For example, number one, these laws are not based on culture, gender, or age. Simply stated, these laws cross all type of cultures. And I know that because I have taught the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership in over 20 countries. And no matter whether I'm in India or the Philippines or South Africa, it doesn't matter. These laws cross right over. In other words, people there say, oh my goodness, that applies to me. And for it to be a law, it has to cross culture, it has to cross obviously gender, and it has to be able to be applied to all ages. The second qualifying test to becoming a leadership law is the fact that they relate and apply to all communities. When I say all communities, we've taught the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership in the business community, the academic community, the religious community. Hey, we've even taught the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership in the government community. Whoa, that's a real accomplishment, okay? And I remember a couple of years ago, the Department of Transportation Secretary called me up and said, I want you to come and we're going to bring in the top 500 people in the DOT all over America, and we've been studying the 21 laws. We want you to come in and teach. And I had an incredible day with them. But these laws cross over all communities, all genders, all ages, all cultures. That's what makes them the law. Qualifying test number 3, they're recognized by other leaders as leadership laws. In other words, one of the things I did in the process of writing this book and preparing this lecture is the fact I sat down with other leaders and I said, let me ask you a question. Do you think this is a leadership law? And often, many times, these key players would look at me and say, you know what, John, that's a great thought, but let me give you an exception. It doesn't work over here. And I'd say, hey, you're exactly right. It doesn't work over here. So other great leaders came around me and really helped me to form what I call these 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And then qualifying test number 4. They stand the test of time. You can take these irrefutable laws of leadership and you can put them in this century, you can put them 5 centuries ago. In fact, I have a wonderful friend, Jim Garlow, who just finished writing a book, and it's an incredible book, where he takes the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership and he takes people throughout history, going back to thousands of years, and he talks about how many of them violated the law, how many of them applied the law and were successful with it. And I've had the time of my life just reading this book because all of a sudden I'm seeing the 21 laws as they operated in the times of Caesar and in the times of the Civil War. The laws, they stand the test of time. Now, let me make just 3 or 4 observations quickly about the laws. Observation number 1 is, and here's the good news, I love this one. These laws can be learned. You and I can learn these laws. And the reason I know that is because I've taught these laws for many, many years, and I could literally put names behind every law. In other words, I could literally sit down and say, with this law, I've mentored and taught people this. They've learned these laws. These laws can be learned. Now, just take it a moment with the studio audience here. Here's what I want you to know. As I go through the 21 laws of leadership with you, there are some you're going to do well, there's some you aren't going to do well. Don't get discouraged, because you can learn the law. You can apply yourself and you can learn it. In fact, let's just take a time out for a moment. Look at your neighbor and tell your neighbor, even you can learn these laws. Go ahead and tell them that. Even you. In fact, look at your neighbor, look back at your neighbor and say, in fact, this is the reason I brought you today. Yeah. I was certainly hoping that you could learn these laws. Okay. The second observation I want to make is this. These laws stand alone. What I mean by that is, it's possible in law number 2 that you don't do well. Law number 3, you do well. It's not like building a house where you put brick upon brick. They truly do stand alone. And when I say they stand alone, each law has the possibility of helping you, or each law has the possibility of hurting you, but they're not dependent upon other laws. They don't build on each other. They all stand alone. Observation number 3 is that these laws carry consequences. Now let me explain to you exactly what I mean by when I say these laws carry consequences. About a year ago, I was lecturing on the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, and a guy came up to me, and I'll never forget, he looked at me and said, I just finished reading your book, and he said, I just want you to know, John, I don't agree with one of your laws. And when he told me that, I looked at him, and I smiled, and I said, I don't care. And that kind of threw him for a loop, because I think he thought I would care. And he looked at me and said, what do you mean you don't care? I said, I don't care if you don't agree with one of those laws. He said, well, what do you mean by that? I said, well, they're laws. Whether you agree with them or not, it really doesn't matter. It's kind of like the law of gravity. Somebody coming up to you and say, I just don't buy into the law of gravity. I don't care. But I tell you what, go up to the third-story window. Jump out. In a millisecond, you will buy in to the law of gravity. See, the laws are the laws. And the laws, they don't ask you to buy into them. They just tell you that if you do buy into them, you're going to prosper. And if you don't buy into them, it's going to hurt you. These laws have consequences. So let me tell you one of my favorite stories. It's the story of two guys. They weren't good golfers. I love to play golf, so I love golf stories. Okay, two guys, they're not good golfers, and they get up on the first tee, and the first guy, he sets it up, and he tees it up. He hits the ball, and much to his surprise, for the first time in his life, he hits the ball right down the middle of the fairway. I mean, he is so excited. In fact, this guy's such a terrible golfer, he has never seen his ball after he hit it. This is the first time he can literally say, there's my ball, there's my ball. So he's walking down the fairway with his buddy, and he's so excited because he's in the middle of the fairway. And much to his surprise, the ball is not only in the middle of the fairway. When he gets there, about 200 yards out, it has rolled up on a 4-inch anthill. It's teed up. He grabs his 3-wood, looks at his buddy, and says, this is of God. Swings as hard as he can, misses the whole ball, and kills 5,000 ants. Miracle of miracles, that golf ball that was up here stayed on top of the anthill. Now it's only 2 inches up. It's still teed up. He grabs his 3-wood. He says, I get a second chance. Swings as hard as he can the second time, misses the ball again, and kills 4,998 ants. There are 2 ants left. One ant looks at the other and says, I don't know about you, but if we're going to survive, we had better get on the ball. What I found about leadership is there's consequences. And as you go through this series of training on the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, you don't have to agree with the laws, you don't have to even like the laws, but I'm here to tell you, they'll make you or break you, they'll bless you or curse you. And if you learn how to apply them to your life, it'll be amazing how successful you become. And the last observation I want to make about these leadership laws is that these laws are the foundation of leadership. They're the foundation of leadership. This is what you build your leadership life on. So, I'm ready to go. Let me ask you a question. Are you ready to go? Yes. Okay, law number 1. The law of the lid. The law of the lid says leadership determines the level of effectiveness. Now, this is a huge law, and although I say one law is not more important than any other law, here's what I do want you to know. If I would start off with any law, I must start off with this one, and here's why. Because if you can buy into this law in the next 5 to 6 minutes as I talk to you, if you can buy into this law, you'll have a great passion to learn all the others, and let me explain why. I'm going to illustrate the importance of this law by using my hands. Watch this for a moment. It's kind of a visual illustration. Let's say, for example, my left hand here represents my ability to lead people. This is how well John Maxwell leads people. This is my leadership lid. Okay. If this hand is my leadership, and if this hand is my business, in other words, my company, my department that I'm overseeing, okay, whatever I'm in charge of, here's what I want you to understand. My department, my business, my company, my organization, here's what I want you to understand. The lid of my leadership will never allow my business to get any higher. It'll never allow in other words, if this truly is my leadership lid, my company, my business, my department, my organization, whatever it is, it can never get any higher than the lid of my leadership. In other words, your leadership, my leadership, our leadership lid, whatever it is going to literally control and determine the size of our business. Now, this is huge. If I were sitting where you are right now and I was taking notes, what I'd be saying to myself is something like this. Since the law of the lid says that my leadership is going to determine my effectiveness, the most important thing that I can do in my life is learn how to become a better leader. Let me explain to you. Remember, I've already said to you the laws can be learned. We've already realized that you can learn these laws, okay? In fact, you told your neighbor, you can learn these laws. Now, let me explain to you what can happen. Let's say from a 1 to a 10, my leadership lid is a 4. Well, what that means is if I'm a 4 as a leader, then my business, my organization is going to be a 3. Now here's what's not going to happen. If I'm a 4 as a leader, my business or my organization is not going to keep going above that lid and go to a 4, 5, 6, 7. It's never happened. In the history of mankind, the organization has not grown beyond the lid of the leadership of that organization. The leadership contains and controls and determines the size of the business. Now, so if I'm a 4, you look like a great smart audience, so I'm going to ask you a question. If I'm a 4 as a leader, what's my organization going to come to that I lead? But what's my number? 3, 4 max, isn't that right? Can't be any higher. What it's not going to be a 5, 6, or 7 because my lid is a 4. Now, the good news is I can learn to lead. So here's what I'm saying. If I'm a 4 as a leader and I've got a 3, 3.5, maybe, max, maybe a 4, I doubt, company or organization, here's what I want you to see. If I go from a 4 and I start learning leadership to a 5, to a 6, to a 7, all of a sudden, now look what happens. I have capacity for growth. I have potential for growth. My company can go from a 3 to a 4 to a 5 to a 6. In other words, here's what I'm saying. You can literally double the size of your department. You can just double the size of your company by just lifting your leadership lid. And every one of you here, everyone that would watch these tapes, I want to say this to you. You can lift your leadership lid. But everything, remember this, everything rises and falls on leadership. By the way, where I learned this, when I lived in San Diego, California, I had a fellow by the name of Don Stevenson who was my mentor. And he was the president of Global Hospitality, and that Global Hospitality literally would buy, they would buy resorts that were going bankrupt. Resorts like La Costa, Greenleaf, any kind of major resort across America that was going under financially. What we found was that this company, Global Hospitality, they would come in and they would buy the company. Okay, now get the picture. Here we are. I'm sitting out with Don Stevenson about every other month. He's mentoring me. And I asked him one day, I said, Don, when you go buy a bankrupt company, a resort that's going under, are there some things that you always do? And I'll never forget. He looked at me and said, John, he said, yes, there is. He said, when we go into a bankrupt company, he said, there are 2 things we always do. And I looked at him and said, 2 things? He said, yes, absolutely. He said, the 2 things we always do is, he said, first of all, we train all the people that that are in the service business, the employees. In other words, the guys that are out there when the cars pull up and they're unloading the luggage. He said, we train them all in relational skills. In other words, we train them, we talk to them about how to remember names, how to get along with people. And he said, the reason we do that, the waiters, the waitresses, the people behind the checkout counter, on the grounds. And he said, what we found is 90% of the people who do not return to the resort after their first visit had a bad experience with the employees of the organization. They weren't treated with great respect, or they weren't taken care of well. And so he said, what we do is we go through and we train all the people. Now what I'm doing, I'm sitting there and I'm taking notes, and so I'm writing down to me, make sure that you've trained all the people in your organization. Okay. He said, the second thing we do is, he said, every time we take over a bankrupt company, he said, we fire the president. And I don't write that one down. And I look at him and say, what do you mean you fire the president? He said, John, he said, every time we take over a company that's going under, he said, we fire the president. I said, well, that seems a little harsh, isn't it? I mean, don't you first go see him, you know what I mean? Go sit in the office, light a fire in the fireplace, hold hands, do a little kumbaya, you know what I'm talking about? No. He said, John, he said, we fire the president. And I'm pressing him a little bit more, and I couldn't remember because he was eating the salad. He was just looking down, eating the salad, talking to me. And he stops, puts his fork down. Now he's looking at me. He's a little bit ticked that I'm not catching this, And he's looking at me. He said, John, listen to me. He said, if the president were any good, the company wouldn't be going bankrupt. The first thing we do is fire the president. I remember finally saying, okay, fire the president. You know what he was teaching me that day? He was teaching me the law of the lid. What he was really saying to me is that it's an absolute fact that in any organization, everything rises and falls on leadership. And the leadership of that organization will determine the size of that organization. And so therefore, when you have a good company that's thriving and doing great business and excelling, you've got good leadership. And when you've got a company that's stagnant and it's going downhill and it's not going well, I can promise you, you have bad leadership. Everything rises and falls on leadership. Now let me tell you what that law did for me as a leader. That day, when I walked out from the table, after listening to Don talk to me, that day, what I realized was that I was responsible as a leader. That I had to now take responsibility for my organization. I had to take responsibility for my people. I had to take responsibility for the success of my company. That I couldn't go and blame someone else. I read a statement recently that's just powerful. Here's what it is. It's easier to go from failure to success than it is to go from excuses to success. That's a tremendous statement. And whenever as a leader I begin to make excuses for why my company is not doing well or why my organization is not doing well, and I began to go say, well, you know what I mean, we're in the wrong location and we got the wrong people. Listen, cut the excuses out. If you're the leader, learn to lead and take responsibility for that leadership. Here's the good news. You can grow as a leader. You can become a better leader than you are right now. That I promise you. But take responsibility. Because the law of the lid says the organization or the company cannot rise any higher than your level of leadership. The law of the lid is a huge law. So if you'll notice in your workbook, I have some questions. Just some simple questions. Questions that I want you on your own to ask yourself. Questions such as, what is the lid number on my leadership? From a 1 to a 10, where am I? Question number 2. I love this one. Would those around me agree with my assessment? Get your leadership team together. And, hey, by the way, let me just say this. If when you're kind of evaluating yourself, if you put down that you're probably from a 1 to a 10, you're probably like a 9.5. And you ask your team, you get your team together and say, what do you think my number is? And they say you're a 2.5. You're probably missing something. So let those around you evaluate and assess your leadership. And then question number 3, what is my plan to increase my lid number, my leadership lid number? How am I going to grow it? Because I have found that this is absolutely key. The ability to prepare and do curriculum like we're doing here so that you can grow as a leader. I mean, how am I going to grow my leadership lid? And question number 4, what are the lid numbers of those that work with me? That's a great question. Those that are around you close, Because one of the laws we'll study in the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership is the law of the inner circle. And the law of the inner circle says those closest to me determine the level of my success. So what are the lid numbers of those around me? And then question number 5, what is my plan to increase their lid numbers? What's my plan? How am I going to increase the lid numbers of those around me? Law number 1, the law of the lid. The second law is the law of influence. And the law of influence says the true measure of leadership is influence. Nothing more, nothing less. I love this law, and when I teach it, I find sometimes it throws an emotional curve to people. Let me explain to you what I mean. You see, the law of influence says leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. I find most people want to attach other definitions to leadership. They want to say things like, John, I think leadership is title. And by the way, I have a leadership title. Or I think leadership is position. And by the way, I have a leadership position. I find that a lot of people want to tie all kinds of definitions into leadership. And let me just tell you, leadership is influence. Nothing more, nothing less. Let me explain it this way. The person with the most influence at any given time, for any given reason, in any given group, is the leader of the pack. Now, what that means is there are times when influence changes. There's times when one person will have more influence than another, but when you get onto another issue or another subject, that another person that leadership may shift a little bit because we are not all strong in all areas. And so therefore, when I'm talking about leadership as influence, what it shows is there's a fluidness of leadership, and that leadership doesn't always stay with one person. In fact, let me give you a perfect example of this. As we study together the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, one of the first things you're going to realize is this. You do not do well in all 21 laws. Okay? And for those that are in the studio today, I just want you to know, you won't do well on all 21 laws. Now, here's what's going to happen. As you evaluate yourself on each law, here's what's going to happen. You're going to have a tendency to think that when you do well on a law, you're going to say to yourself, now that is a true law of leadership. Yeah. Oh, John's right on there. Oh, that is so good. He's just, that is true. And on the laws that you don't do so well, you're going to say, that may not be a law of leadership. Now what you're going to find is you're going to do well on some laws, you're going to not do well on some laws. Hey, that's the way it is. In fact, there are going to be some laws, I'll point them out to you, that I don't do well on. Now here's what I want you to see. That's why it's important for you not only to understand leadership, but that's why it's important for you to have a leadership team. That's why it's important for you to train leaders around you. And here's why. In fact, I have seen over the last 3 decades, in the 80s, I saw that the great word was management. Everybody talked about management. Peter Drucker did some great things on management. And when we got to the 90s, in corporate America, it changed from management to leadership. Now, there's a reason for that. See, managers assume things will always stay the same. Leaders assume things will always change. And so in the 80s, when things were stable, wow, we needed managers to kind of control and to make sure everything was being taken care of. In the 90s, when we got to leadership, all of a sudden it drastically changed. We needed guys and gals and men and women that were fast-paced and could change and embrace change. And I can tell you, as now we've entered into a whole new century, I can promise you we've gone from management in the 80s to leadership in the 90s, to now I can tell you we're going, as we've entered in a whole new, not only decade, but a whole new century, we're going now to team leadership. And the reason we're going to team leadership is because the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership will teach you and me, very simply, that you just don't do all 21 things well. You don't, I don't. Now, the moment we understand that, I've got to have a leadership team. And the reason that I have to have a leadership team is because I need people around me that can absolutely make up for my weaknesses and can complement me. Does that make sense? So, for example, as we're teaching through here, here's what I want you to see. As I walk down here and just kind of use maybe my front row for an example, because this will work. Let's say, for example, this is my leadership team. My name's John. What's your name?
Chuck Ramsey.
Okay, Chuck, perfect. Let's say we're in one of the laws, and let's say Chuck does a better job at one of the laws than I do. One of the reasons we need to evaluate ourselves, and one of the reasons we need to have a leadership team around us is because we all need to know that if I get to the law of navigation, by the way, that's a law I'll teach later on, that's a law I'm weak in. I'm not a good navigator. what I have to realize is, but let's say Chuck is I'm a 2 as a navigator, okay? I mean, just trust me. You don't want me to navigate. I'm kind of like Mr. Magoo. Okay, so you don't want that. You don't want Mr. Magoo running the ship now. But Chuck, let's say he's a 9. What that means is when we get to something in our organization that requires navigating, what we do is I take and now Chuck has more influence, because if you know Chuck's a better navigator than me, who are you going to follow? See, for too long we've said, "Follow me because I have the position." How ridiculous. Follow me because I have the title. I'm the president. I'm the one that's over everybody. Follow me. That's not a good reason to follow somebody. You ought to follow a person because they're competent. You ought to follow a person because they're best. And the secure leaders, and I'll talk about the law of empowerment. That's another law. But the secure leaders look around and say, "Look, gang, let me tell you something. Chuck's a better navigator than me." So when it comes to navigating the day-to-day process, and we've got to navigate maybe for a 3-6 month period on some issue in the organization, Chuck's going to have the ball, and I'm going to follow Chuck. Because all great leaders are not only leaders, they're great followers. Because they appreciate the value that true leadership brings. Does that make sense? So leadership is influence. I may have influence in some areas. Chuck will have influence in other areas. What's your name?
Bridget.
Bridget will have influence. In other words, the person that is the best leader should have the most influence in that given area. Make sense? So look around you and ask yourself, who is influential and in what areas are they influential? That's why, several years ago, I designed a way for people to understand influence as it pertains to leadership that would make sense to them. And in your notes, if you'll take just a moment for me, I want to draw your attention to the 5 levels of leadership. And when I use the word leadership, I could use the word influence. I use them interchangeably. And what I want to do is I want to walk you through this because this is essential for you to understand where you are as far as what level of influence you have and where you should go to increase your influence level. For example, let's go down to the very bottom step, okay? On that first lowest level, put the word position. Now, that's the lowest level of influence. That's the lowest level of leadership. In other words, when you and I go to an organization, we get a title, we get a position. Now, right inside that step is another blank. I encourage you to put the word rights, because that's the key word when you're on the position level of leadership. Let me explain. When you and I have a title, when you and I have a position, we get certain rights that come with the position. Is that true? They'll look at you and say, "You're going to be over these 6 people. This is going to be your department. These are your people that you're responsible for." Okay. In other words, at level number 1, people follow you because they have to. In other words, people say, "Why are you following that person?" Well, it's because they're the boss. They're the leader. I have to. In other words, I'm under them. I really don't have any choice. Now, let me share something with you. Every one of us in this studio, every one of you that watch me do the leadership training, anybody that's just observing what I'm saying right now and understanding these levels of leadership, every one of us have had to follow people that weren't good leaders. Isn't that true? How many of you we don't need to call out names, okay, let's not get personal here. How many of you have at one time in your business life or your work life had to follow somebody and they were just a lousy leader? I mean, that's absolute. That's 100% in the studio. Let me ask you this question. How many of you are sitting beside that person right now? Don't go there. Don't go there. Don't go there. The first question is a leadership question. The second question is an IQ question. Okay, don't raise your hand on the second one. That would not be a good thing. Okay. Now, here's what I'm saying. Every one of us have had to follow people that were not good leaders. Why? Because they had the position and title. This year, I'm going to be speaking to the West Point. I'm coming in for 2.5 days. I'm going to be speaking to all the cadets. I'm going to be speaking to the leadership. And they want me to talk about the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership because they teach it there. What's interesting is my challenge as I go to West Point will be I'm going to teach the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And so much of the service area is based on rank. And what they're going to have to understand, and what I'm going to do my best to teach them, of course, they're very, very sharp, so they're going to understand it very quickly, probably much better than I ever could, is they're going to have to understand that just because people follow you because you have a position doesn't mean that you're a great leader. Does that make sense? Level number 2 is the permission level. Let me walk you through the rest of these very quickly. And the key word on the inside of level number 2 is relationships. At level number 2, people follow you because they want to. And by the way, just stop for a moment and look at your notes. There's a world of difference between 1 and 2. In step number 1, people follow you because they have to. In step number 2, people follow you because they want to, because now you've developed relationships with them. Level number 3 is the production level. And the key word is results. Basically what I'm saying at level number 3 is this. At level number 3, people follow you because of what you've done for the organization. In other words, it's growing. The profit's better. The morale is higher. Okay, now all of a sudden people are following you because you've been successful in the organization. That's level 3. Level number 4 is the people development level. That's always my goal. When we talk about a couple of the laws of leadership, I'll talk more about people development. But at people development, the key word is reproduction. Oh, yes. People follow you there because of what you have done for them. What you have done for them as individuals. In other words, on level number 3, they follow you because of results and what you've done for the company. At level number 4, they follow you because of what you have done for them. Now they're personally growing. Now they can say, I'm a better person. I'm more effective in my job because you've equipped them, you've given them tools. In the last level is what I call the personhood level. And the key word there is respect. And basically, you have done it so well with so many people for so long that people just automatically put you up there. So it's a wonderful level to be on. And I would encourage you on law number 2 just to take some time and look at the questions and ask yourself questions about influence and how you can more effectively influence others. The 5 levels of leadership, which is a lecture in itself, has its own training video because I spend a great deal of time really helping people work through those 5 laws. But for right now, the law of influence says there are 5 levels of influence and you need to know where you are because leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. The 3rd law is the law of process. And the law of process says leadership develops daily, not in a day. This is an incredible law. I love to teach it, and the reason I love to teach it is because if a person can understand process, they're going to be very effective as a leader. But if they don't understand the process of becoming a leader, they're going to get very frustrated. Let me explain to you. Many times when I do leadership conferences, when we have a Q&A period of time, probably the most common question asked me when I do leadership conference, somebody raised their hand and say, John, here's the question. Are leaders born? And whenever they ask me the question, are leaders born? I always look at them and I always say, of course they are. Think about that question. I've never met an unborn leader. Don't particularly want to either, thank you very much. Now what they're really asking is, they're not asking are leaders born. What they're really asking is, are there leaders that, are people when they're born, they kind of got it. You know what I'm saying? They got it, and are there people when they're born, they don't got it. And I suppose if you got it, you lead, and if you don't got it, you get in line. You know what I mean? And hope there's a water fountain at the end somewhere, okay? That's a very important question. Because what I have found is this, and this is so huge. What I have found is there are a lot of people who just think you either have it or you don't have it. And I'm going to tell you right now, that is not true. There are people that have leadership leanings. Of course there are. Just like there are people when they're born, they have kind of musical leanings. So there are leanings toward leadership that some people have that other people don't have. But anyone can learn to be a leader. In fact, that's why I have such a passion to teach leadership. That's why I have such a passion to teach these laws. Because if you learn these laws, it becomes absolutely amazing how well you're going to be able to learn to lead. So let me take a moment and explain to you a couple important thoughts in this law. In your notes, we overestimate the event and we underestimate the process. I have found this to be very common with people in leadership. They overestimate what an event will do for them. They come to a leadership conference or they read a leadership book and they say, oh my goodness, this is so good. And this is going to make me a leader. This is going to change me. Now, let me just explain to you the difference between the event and the process because this will help you understand the law of process. For example, when you go to a leadership event, I'm talking about like going to a leadership conference, reading a leadership book, Okay, listening to a leadership lecture. Okay, when you go to a leadership event, that encourages decisions. That's what it does. In other words, you go in and say, oh my goodness, I know it's important for me to lead, so I'm going to make a decision. For example, when I taught you the law of the lid and said that everything's going to rise and fall on your leadership, many of you made a choice probably. You said, oh my goodness, then if that's the truth and my lid of leadership is going to determine how effective I am in my business, I'm going to have to learn to lead. That's a decision. Events encourage decisions. The process encourages development. The emphasis in process is continue to grow and develop yourself. The event motivates people. We all love to come and be motivated and encouraged, but the process matures people. And we're wanting to mature you as a leader. To motivate you, yes, but mature you is much more important. The event is a calendar issue. You say, okay, on this certain date, I'm going to go to an event and learn some leadership, whereas the process is a culture issue. It's being in an environment or a culture that encourages you every day to learn, every day to grow, every day to develop yourself as a leader. The event challenges people. I find that I'm challenged when I go to leadership events, but the process changes people. Why? Because you can't change overnight. You can make a sudden decision, but you can't make a sudden change. That's a process. And there's a lot of difference between that. You see, here's what I think. I think the event is easy, and I think the process is difficult. And I want to encourage you, as you're watching these training tapes, to understand that it's a process. And it's not one day, one time, one book, one lecture that's going to change your life. But it's going through the process of doing that. And the reason that leadership must be a process is because leadership is many-faceted. In fact, think about it for a moment. There are 21 irrefutable laws of leadership. Just the very fact there are 21 laws of leadership tells you you just can't absorb it, or you can't learn it, or you can't apply it instantly. I was doing a leadership lecture in, a couple years ago, doing a conference. And I'll never forget, during the break, I was signing books, and this kid came up to me, and he was just out of college, and kind of probably a business major, and he was all excited about leadership, what he was learning. And I could see his passion. I love kids because, they just have great passion. So he came up to me, and he kind of gets in my face a little bit, and he said, okay, John, he said, I love this leadership stuff. So I've been listening to you all day. So I got a question. I said, what's your question? He said, what's the one thing I need to know about leadership? I thought, oh my. So I sucked it up to get energy. Here we go. Got to match this kid's intensity. So I looked at him and I kind of got in his face. And I said, the one thing you need to know to be a great leader is that there is more than one thing you need to know to be a great leader. In fact, I said there are 21 things that you need to know to be a great leader. Now, you see, here's the kid. What's he doing? He's trying to take leadership and condense it. He's basically wanting me to fast food leadership. He's wanting to come to the window of leadership and get a sack of leadership. You know what I'm saying? And take off down the road with this sack of leadership and kind of eat it on the way and come out of the car as a great leader. Can't happen. Why? Because leadership is many-faceted. Let me explain. Look at your notes for a moment. We've already understood that, first of all, leadership is influence. So it certainly is the ability to influence people, but it's more than influence. I can show you people that have influence, but they're not great leaders. Isn't that true? Well, it's also, secondly, navigation. The ability to take people from point A to point B to point C. So there's a navigating principle of leadership, and yet I can show you people that are tour guides that aren't good leaders. Or thirdly, it's empowerment. It's the ability to take people and empower them. Of course it is. To be able to put belief in people and let them go to a higher level on their own. But it's more than empowerment. Number 4, it's relationships. It's getting along with people. And yet I know people who get along with me very well, but they can't lead anything. Number 5, it's timing. There's a huge amount of timing that's involved in leadership, and the ability to understand timing. It's huge. In fact, there's a whole law on it. But it's more than timing. Number 6, it's momentum. If you do timing right, you get the big mo going for you. And it's the ability to sense and feel the surge of momentum in an organization, but it's more than momentum. It's more than just getting the big mo going for you. Number 7 is sacrifice. It's the ability to give up so you can go up. Of course it is. And yet I know people that they've sacrificed and they're still not great leaders. You see, you're beginning to catch this. Number 8, it's attitude. It's the way you think. And yet I know people have great attitudes that aren't great leaders. Now, let me just stop down. Here's what I think it's very obvious to all of us right now. It's very obvious to all of us. And that is, it's many-faceted. In other words, it's the ability to understand a lot of things that make you a well-rounded, mature leader. It's kind of like in the NFL and pro quarterbacks. It's kind of like a rookie quarterback coming into that major league. It's impossible for them the first year to be probably a great quarterback. There's just too much. I was up speaking the other day with the Cleveland Browns and Butch Davis and the crew, and they were talking to me, and I literally had a guy give me a 30-minute teaching on the quarterback and all they have to learn in their first year. And I thought, I was amazed. I thought, oh my goodness. It's, read the defenses and understand the offense and be able to sense the shifts and be able to change the play in a moment. It's a lot of stuff. Now, here's what I want you to know. I think that the problem is too many times we try to microwave leaders. We put them in a microwave, we get them in our company and say, oh my goodness, I got to develop some leaders. And I got this Maxwell stuff. He said, develop leaders. So come here, I want you to be a leader. I think you can be a leader. Here, get in the microwave. We push them in here, push a few buttons and zap them. By the way, because we microwave so many leaders, that's why we have so many Pop-Tart leaders running around. If you got a lot of Pop-Tart people in your company, it's because you've been microwaving. We need to quit microwaving leaders. And we need to start crock-potting leaders. That's huge. One more thought about this tremendous law of process. That is, the secret of our success is discovered in our daily agenda. What we do every day is the secret to our success. Not what we do at one moment or not what we're going to do sometime. A couple of years ago, I wrote a book called Your Roadmap for Success. And I'll never forget when I wrote the book, my publisher wanted to call it Your Roadmap to Success. I said, no, you can't call it the Roadmap to Success because there's no such place as success is not a destination. It's a journey. It's a process. And so many times we confuse true success with what I call recognition of success. It's like my friend one time said to me, he said, John, all my life I've worked hard at being an overnight success. Bingo. That's so key. It's a process. The law of process says leaders develop daily, not in a day. Law number 4 is the law of navigation. And the law of navigation says anyone can steer the ship, but it takes a leader to chart the course. I've often described leadership in kind of 2 terms. There's what I call the art form of leadership, and then there's a technical form of leadership. The law of navigation is a technical form of leadership. It's very tangible. It's point A to point B to point C. For example, the law of timing or the law of intuition, that's art form of leadership. It's much more subjective. It's much harder to get your hands around it. But Jack Welch was exactly right when he said, a good leader remains focused. Controlling your destination is better than being controlled by it. So let's study for a few minutes the law of navigation. I brought with me something I read the other day that I just love. And I want to pass it on to you. So just kind of sit and relax for a moment. Let me just read you this I think, humorous story. A man in a hot air balloon realized that he was lost. He reduced altitude and spotted a woman below. He descended a bit more and he shouted, "Excuse me, can you help me? I promised a friend that I would meet him an hour ago, but I don't know where I am." The woman below replied, "You're in a hot air balloon, hovering approximately 30 feet above the ground. You're between 40 and 41 degrees north latitude and between 59 and 60 degrees west longitude." "You must be an engineer," said the balloonist. "I am," replied the woman. "How did you know?" "Well," answered the balloonist, Everything you told me is technically correct, but I have no idea what to make of your information. And the fact is, I'm still lost. Frankly, you've not been much help at all. If anything, you've delayed my trip." The woman below responded, "You must be in management." You can see the train a coming, can't you? Said, "You must be in management." "I am," replied the balloonist. "But how did you know?" "Well," said the woman, "you don't know where you are or where you're going. You have risen to where you are due to a large quantity of hot air. You made a promise which you have no idea how to keep, and you expect people beneath you to solve your problems. And the fact is, you are in exactly the same position you were in before we met, but now somehow it's my fault." Isn't that great, huh? When I think of the law of navigation, trying to get from one point to another, there's one thing, of course, that we have to understand, and that is, if anybody is going to be a good leader and navigate, you have to know where you are. And again, I referred to on an earlier law the Mr. Magoo thing. I mean, let me tell you something. When you get on the ship, you don't want to look up and see that the captain is Mr. Magoo. It just kind of is a little bit unsettling. And the reason for that is, in your notes, there are 3 statements I want to make. And the 3 statements are these. A leader is one who sees more than others see. That's a fact. That's part of leadership. What do leaders do? They see the big picture. Is that not true? But the second statement, a leader is one who sees farther than others see. In other words, a leader is a person who looks out and he can see distant horizon and has great vision. But the third thought I want you to know is that a leader is one who sees before others see. It's also a timing issue. And one of the qualities of a leader is you put them in a room, they sense things. They sense things quicker than others sense them. It's not an IQ issue. It's not that they're smarter. It's just the fact that they have leadership within them, and they sense a need before others sense a need. They sense an opportunity before others sense an opportunity. So what do leaders do? Especially if you're a good navigating leader, you see more than others see, you see farther than others see, and you see before others see. That's what good leaders do. Bill Eason said one time, realistic leaders are objective enough to minimize illusions. They understand that self-deception can cost them their vision. Or Max Dupree, my friend, said this. He said the number one responsibility of a leader is to define reality. What I have found about great navigational leaders is they're highly realistic, because they realize they have the responsibility of taking other people on a trip where they have never gone before, and they understand that they have to have experience and success. In fact, there's a world of difference. Think about it for a moment. There's a world of difference between a travel agent and a tour guide. A travel agent, they get your tickets for you, and they get brochures for you, and they send you on a trip. You know what? They send you and me on trips every day of places they've never been before. You know what I'm saying? They bon voyage and have a good trip, and here are your tickets, and hope everything turns out right. Well, what travel agents, they send you where they've never been before. But a tour guide, when you go to the place you arrived at this place, you have a tour guide. You know what a tour guide? Tour guide basically says, I'm going to take you where I've been many times before. And I'm going to tell you about what I know. See, the great navigating leaders are leaders who they've been there and they've done that. But they're not in a been there, done that. Haven't you run people who kind of go around, well, been there, done that, been there, done, and they're bored. You know what I'm saying? You kind of say, well, you've been there too many times. You've done that too many times. Are you with me? So we've seen the been there. No. The great navigational leaders, they're been there, done that, but their excitement is taking people with them on the journey. I was just last week with Jim Winokur, who was the first American to go climb Mount Everest. And when we're sitting down around the table and having a wonderful lunch together, and I was asking Jim about some of his experiences, I'm just listening because he just has incredible experiences. And I said, what are you most proud of? I mean, you've been to Mount Everest on more than one occasion, the top. I said, what are you most proud of? And he said, John, what I'm most proud of is, he said, I have taken more people to the top of Mount Everest than any other person. And I thought, there is a true navigator. There's a person who understands that my joy isn't getting to the top. Been there, done that. My joy is getting other people to go to the top with me. And think about it for a moment. That's what navigators do. How many of you have ever heard the expression, it's lonely at the top? Huh? You've heard that, haven't you? Now, every time we hear the expression, it's lonely at the top, we think that a leader said that. A leader didn't say that. Think about it for a moment. If you're lonely, if you're all by yourself at the top, you're not leading anybody. If you're at the top all alone, here's the thought, get off of the top and go down to where the people are. Go down and find your team and take your team to the top with you. That's what leaders do. Doesn't that make sense? To help me, because I am weak in this law, I'm not an A to point B to point C. It's not a strength of mine. I'm more visionary. I developed something in the 70s. I'm talking about 25 years ago as a young leader, knowing I had a lot of leadership responsibilities and realizing I was leading people that were older than me, more experienced than me, because I was just young. I developed a wonderful process that's helped me to navigate that I want to give to you. And in your notes, I want to walk you through this wonderful, wonderful step-by-step process of how to plan ahead. Are you ready? The letter P. The letter P stands for predetermine your course of action. In other words, as a leader, what do? The first thing I do is I determine where do I want to go. I don't wait till the crowd's saying let's go somewhere and then say where do I want to go. What's a leader do? Leaders predetermine. They think before others think. They see before others see. They've got that leadership edge. So predetermine your course of action. The letter L, lay out your goals. Basically, goals are nothing more than stepping stones. They're a process. So when I say lay out your goals, what I'm talking about basically is this. Use each one of your goals as stepping stones. So if I use this little platform for a moment, my goal is to get back up to the bar stool, basically I say, okay, here's goal 1 and here's goal 2. In other words, lay out your goals, develop them. Now, as soon as you lay out your goals, letter A comes into being. Because as soon as you lay out your goals, the letter A stands for adjust your priorities. I found this to happen. Now, I've been doing this now for 25 years, and here's what I found to happen. I found that every time I lay out my goals and predetermine course of action, I realize I have to adjust my priorities. Because you know what I'm doing? I'm doing things that are never going to get me there. You follow me? And I say, oh my goodness, John, why are you doing this? Because if you're wanting to really get this, and this is your destination, you're carrying extra weight. So predetermine course of action, lay out your goals, adjust your priorities, okay. The letter N, notify key personnel. Very simple. Take your key personnel and sit down and talk to them and notify and share the vision. For example, if this is my team again, what I do is I sit down and say, hey, gang, here's what I'm thinking. Here's the dream. Here's the vision. What do you think? And if your team is good, you know what they'll do? They'll take what you give them and they'll give it to you back better than you gave it to them. Isn't that right? They always make it better. When anybody asks me, says, John, how do I know that I have a good team around me? I can tell you how you know you have a good team around you. Every time you give them something, they give it back to you at a higher level. They take and stretch and grow you. But you notify your key personnel. In other words, you have your key meeting. You have your meeting before the meeting. Oh, that's a huge lecture in itself. But you got to always have a meeting before the meeting, because if you don't have your meeting before the meeting, you're going to have a very bad meeting. Notify key personnel. Letter A, allow time for acceptance. Because it's going to take a while. So allow time for acceptance. I can promise you, people change slowly. So give them time to kind of digest and process that in their own mind emotionally. Letter H, head into action. Get going. I mean, there comes a time you go. And by the way, leaders have a bias toward action. And so leaders love the head into action part. They say, okay, now it's time. We've been thinking and planning long enough. Let's go. Head into action. And as soon as you head into action, the letter E comes into place. Watch this one. Expect problems. The moment you create movement in the organization, the moment that you take action, expect problems. And somebody asked me one time in a conference, I raised their hand and said, John, why? Okay, help me out here. They said, when you say expect problems, why should I have problems when I head into action? I said, it's very simple. motion causes friction. And the moment that you head into action, somebody realizes they're going to have to make changes. Head into action. Get going. Expect problems. I got problems. You got problems. We all got problems. Okay, expect those problems because they're going to happen. Okay? And as you expect those problems and as you're moving forward, understand it's not because you haven't learned. It's not because you're being a bad leader. It's not because you haven't done things well. It's just because problems happen to all of us. Let me just take a little poll here. How many of you as a leader have at least one problem? I was talking to a leader recently and he was complaining about the problems. I said, don't complain about the problems. I said, think about it. That's why you have a job. If everybody was doing the right thing, probably they wouldn't need you. This is a good thing that you have problems. But after expecting problems, always point to your successes. Always point to your successes, and the reason for that's very simple. Because you got somebody in the company that will point to your failures, okay? This gives hope to your people. This encourages your people. And then finally, the letter D, daily review your progress. Daily review it. Sit down and say, okay, how am I doing? Am I farther along today than I was yesterday? I have found that the secret of navigation is preparation. And the best navigating leaders are those who spend time preparing themselves so that they can effectively take their people on the trip. Law number 5 is the law of E.F. Hutton. And the law of E.F. Hutton simply states, when the real leader speaks, people listen. Now, a couple of these laws in the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership are related. For example, I have found that the law of E.F. Hutton is closely related to the law of influence. Remember, the law of influence basically says leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. The law of E.F. Hutton says, when the real leader speaks, people listen. But let me talk to you about this for a moment because I have found that this is a key in understanding people. For example, what I have found, and there are so many examples I can give you in the law of E.F. Hutton, what I have found, for example, in a group, and let me go back to my team and using this kind of as an illustration. What I have found is that if you get in a group of people and there's a decision to be made, the people in that group will automatically look at who the real leader is. They just will. For example, let's just say Bridget is the real leader on the team, okay? What's your name?
Rob.
Rob John's my name. Nice to meet you. Okay. Rob, let's say we're in this group, and Bridget's the real leader, but Chuck he's kind of got the floor. He's talking about something that he'd like to see passed on the team level or whatever. Okay, now, if Chuck's talking about something he thinks very important, and maybe it's a budget item, and maybe he's wanting some more money for his area or whatever it is, okay, here's what I'm saying. If Chuck's talking about something that's very important, of which a decision is going to have to be made, but if Bridget is the true leader, I mean, she's the real leader, she's the influencer, she's the E.F. Hutton, it's Bridget E.F. Hutton, okay? Got the picture? Here's what I found. You and the rest of the team, while Chuck's talking, are watching Bridget. Because what you're doing is, she is the E.F. Hutton. She is the real leader. And you're watching Bridget because she's going to, by her actions, give you some kind of sense of if she's excited about this or not. Does it make sense? And if for example, if Bridget starts nodding while Chuck is talking, the rest of us, we kind of smile a little bit, and we start nodding while Chuck is talking. And Chuck's talking. You know what Chuck's thinking? He's thinking he's doing a good job. Chuck's saying, oh, this is really good. They're really, hey, I'm glad I prepared this speech. I'm really doing good here. Well, Chuck, you're doing good, but that isn't why we're excited. See, we're nodding because E.F. Hutton, Bridget here, the real leader, she's nodding, and we're getting her signals from her. Just ask Chuck, if you were given the same speech, and Bridget's got her arms crossed, and it's kind of like, no, we don't want to do that, we're not. And we all start crossing our arms, and you start saying, man, I'm not doing a very good job with this. Well, no, you're doing fine. You're doing fine. You see, the issue is not whether you're doing a good job or a bad job. The issue is that E.F. Hutton either likes it or don't like it, and we take our signals always from the real leader. Now, let me just explain for a moment. This is very key in leadership. Let me give you a pointer here, Chuck, that'll help you. If you've got a proposal and you want the rest of our team here to buy into your proposal, what you really need to do before you have the meeting with us, you need to take Bridget to lunch. And you need to have a meeting with her. And you need to be saying, Bridget, I just want you to understand that this is important. And you want to get her buy-in. In fact, Chuck, if you're a smart leader, when you come to the meeting, if you've had the meeting before the meeting, again, remember? If you had the meeting before me, if you're really smart, when you do it, you'll say something like the rest of the team, you'll say, team, by the way, Bridget and I have talked about this. And we think it's a good idea. Woo! That's a lot. See, because all great leaders take the vision, Chuck, from me to we. And until the vision is a vision of we, it's not a great vision. And what you need to do is you need to understand who the influencers are. You need to know who the E.F. Huttons are. And this is very key because what I have found in leading now for 30 years, I have found that a leader's responsibility is to pick out who the E.F. Huttons are. And you know what? Bridget may be one of the influencers, maybe one of the E.F. Huttons. What's your name, sir? Jay? Yes. Jay may be one of the influencers. And see, as a leader, I say, okay, man, I need Jay in this project. I need Bridget in this project. What's your name, sir? Tommy. I might say, okay, I got to have Tommy in this project. Okay, what I do is, here's what I want you to know. There may be a couple hundred people in the studio, but what you have to know is you have to go to the influencers. And if it's Jay, and if it's Tommy, and if it's Bridget, if these are the people that are the influencers, I need to bring them in because they're the E.F. Huttons. And when they speak, they're going to carry the ball for me. In fact, here's the way I have always tried to do it as a leader. I've never had a meeting with everybody until I've had meetings with the key people. And what I would do is I'd walk into a room like this and I would say, listen, gang, I'm very excited about a vision. I'm very excited about something I want to share with you. In fact, for the last couple of days, Jay and Tommy and Bridget and I have been talking together. And what we've decided is this is the best way for the organization. In fact, let me tell you something. Tommy gave me a thought on this that's just tremendous, and I'll throw in a Tommy thought. And you know what? When we talked about this, Bridget said we ought to do this. And Jay, what you said the other day about this, you know what I'm doing? I'm tying them all in. So they're not just following me. They're following E.F. Hutton Jay. And they're following E.F. Hutton Bridget. And they're following E.F. Hutton Tommy. Because the real leaders have the influence, and when the real leader speaks, people listen. Haven't you seen this happen where somebody stands up and speaks, and as they're speaking, nobody's paying any attention? Huh? Haven't you seen that? You know, I've watched them. You know, somebody's up there just speaking, and nobody's home. Nobody's home. In fact, there's been a lot of times I wanted to stand and say, "Excuse me, sir. Excuse me." None of us are home. I know you're exercising your jaw a little bit, but we're not listening. Remember, I'm kind of old, so I remember there used to be a TV show called The Gong Show. Yeah. And what happens, somebody's up there speaking, and when people get tired of speaking, somebody could take like a big mallet, go over and gong that sucker, and they had to be done. I've always thought, every business meeting needs a gong show. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And when somebody's up there and you're just tired of hearing, you say, "Could I have the mallet, please? Could I have the mallet? You know, not the ballot, please, the mallet, please." And just go over and gong that sucker and let it be done. Let it be done. Because the law of E.F. Hutton said, when the real leader speaks, people listen. That's why it's so important for you and I to understand that we've got to be more than positional leaders. And in your notes, let me explain the difference between positional leaders and real leaders. Positional leaders have a title, but not always a following. Where real leaders have a following, but not always a title. Positional leaders influence positional people. I've seen that happen all the time. Oh, you're Dr. So-and-so. Well, I'm Dr. So-and-so. Here's my card. Here's your card. The only people, a lot of times, positional people lead or control or influence are positional people. But real leaders, they influence everyone. In fact, let me put it this way. When you have to tell people that you're the leader of the pack, you're not. And every once in a while I have somebody say, well, you know, I just have to declare my leadership. I just have to stand up and say, hey. I'm the leader. Follow? That's why I love the leadership proverb. It says, he that thinketh he leadeth and hath no one following him is only taking a walk. And don't you know, okay, people taking walks? Why? They're taking walks because they're not E.F. Hutton. So what makes a real leader? What defines a real leader? Look at your notes, because I think this is huge. Real leaders become real leaders because of character. In other words, who they are. Real leaders become real leaders because of relationships, who they know. Real leaders become real leaders because of knowledge, what they know. Real leaders become real leaders because of intuition, what they feel. Real leaders become real leaders because of experience, where they've been. Real leaders become real leaders because of past successes, what they've done. And real leaders become real leaders because of ability, what they can do. What I've just shared with you about real leaders becoming real leaders, spend some time there. Ask yourself, am I a person of character? Do I have good relationships with people around me? Do I know what I'm doing? Do I sense what's happening to those around me? Do I have good experience? Have I had some good wins under my belt and some past experiences? And do I have just good, decent ability? Because the law of E.F. Hutton says, when the real leader speaks, people listen. Law number 6 is the law of solid ground. And the law of solid ground says, trust is the foundation of leadership. In fact, an expression I've used often that's in your workbook is this: trust is the glue that holds an organization and the leader together. It's the glue. And I want to talk to you about trust, and I want to talk to you about integrity, I want to talk to you about character. And in fact, to build trust in your notes, there are 2 things that you must, as a leader, be able to do. You must demonstrate consistent competence. Obviously, you have to consistently be competent in the area in which you're leading. And secondly, you have to demonstrate consistent character. You have to consistently be a person of integrity. And I can think of no law that probably is more important to share with you than this law. And so allow me just to talk to you about a couple of experiences I've had. Recently, I was being interviewed by the Wall Street Journal, and the person that was interviewing me said, John, I would like to talk to you about business ethics. They said, you know, in corporate America, things are not going real well, and there are a lot of leaders that have probably violated the trust factor. So he said, if you don't mind, I'd like to do about a 30-minute interview with you on business ethics. And I know I shocked him, and I said, we don't need a 30-minute interview on business ethics because there's no such thing as business ethics. It got real quiet on the end of the phone. And the interviewer said, well, I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about, all this business ethics that we've had and all the corporate side and how that these leaders are just not really trustworthy. And they said, I want you to talk to me about business ethics. And again, I said, I'll be glad to talk to you. But I said, there's no such thing as business ethics. And then I said, there's just ethics. You either have it or you don't. And can I tell you something? If you have ethics, guess what? It works in business. And if you don't have ethics, it doesn't work in business. If you have ethics, it works in your community. If you don't have it, it doesn't work in the community. There's no such thing as family ethics or community ethics or business. No. There's just ethics. You got it or you don't. You're either a person of integrity or you're not. You're either a person that has character or you're a person that doesn't have character. And then we got into an amazing, wonderful 35-minute conversation about integrity and character and ethics. Now, what I want you to understand about this law of solid ground is that it's character and it's also competence. I don't in any way want to take away from from the issue of confidence. You have to consistently perform well if you're going to lead. And you have to consistently do right if you're going to lead. And you can't substitute, you can't say, okay, I'm a person of character. I want you to follow me because I'm true to my word. I won't tell you a lie. I'm a great person of integrity. Oh, by the way, I'm a lousy leader. I'm not competent, but follow me. I don't want to follow somebody that has great character and low competence. Do you? You know, the good news is you can trust them. The bad news is you trust them in bad places because they didn't lead you well. So it's not like I want to have you to have character without competence, but I also don't want you to have competence. In other words, be a very good leader, understand and have leadership skills and abilities. I don't want you to be a great leader and lack character because I'm not going to be able to trust you. And one won't substitute for the other. And what we have to understand about the law of solid ground is that in the law of solid ground, we either grow and get better in this area and increase our trust level, or we decrease it and we become worse in it. And the best way to explain this, perhaps, is to illustrate it. And if you allow me, Chuck, let me illustrate with you. Okay, the best way I can explain this law is building trust is like having change in your pocket. Okay. And so what I'm going to do is, let's say that I've just come to the company. I'm the new kid on the block, and I have a kind of a leadership position, and you want me to do well, and Chuck, you're kind of like chairman of the board or whatever it is. Okay, so anyway, what you do is you give me X amount of change of which I am to operate. In other words, you feel I'm trustworthy. You hired me because of character. So okay, and what you're going to do is I'm going to either, because I'm a trustworthy person when I come to the company, I'm going to either increase the change or I'm going to decrease the change. For example, let's say I don't have very good character. I lack integrity. I'm not trustworthy. I don't always tell the truth. And so let's say, I've been here maybe 3 or 4 months and you ask me about a report of which I make an excuse which you know is not true. Well, every time I do something that's not trustworthy, I give up some change out of my pocket. Do you see what I'm saying? But it's okay because I still have change. And as long as I have change, I can still operate because there's a certain level of trust I still have. But let's say a month or two later, you find that I'm not trustworthy in another area. And perhaps I've gone over to Bridget's office, and again, she comes to you and says, you know what, I don't think he's truthful with me in this matter. Well, every time what happens is, every time I don't do well, I give up change. But it's okay because I still have some change. See, as long as I have change in my pocket, I can operate. Well, let's say a few more months go by, and now there are other people who are beginning to talk about the fact that I'm not probably a person of my word, and that they're not sure they can really trust me. And so you talk to me about it. And so now what happens is there's a day when I do something I shouldn't have done, and I walk into your office, and what I've been doing is I've been using my change. I've been living off of goodwill. You follow me? I've been living off of the slack that you gave me. And this time, Chuck, I come in the office and you say, John, here's another issue, and I reach automatically. What I do, I reach in my pocket. And isn't it interesting? Instead of changing my ways, I want to live off of goodwill. And this time, when I reach in my pocket this time, and when I do it this time, this is a picture of a leader in trouble. I'm out of gas. I have no more change in my pocket. It's over. I'm going to have to go to a new organization. Why? Because I have used up the change in my pocket. Now, as I can deplete it by doing things lacking character and lacking integrity, it's also true that if I do things that show character, I increase my change. I was just reading the other day, and this is huge, about a CEO that told his employees, brought together a company meeting, and he said, let me tell you something. If anybody in this company asks you to do anything that's wrong, here's my personal phone number. And anybody ever asks you to tell a lie, anybody ever asks you to fudge a report, anybody ever asks you something that violates your integrity, he said, you don't need to go to your supervisor. He said, you call me immediately. I thought, what a huge statement. Well, Chuck, if I'm trustworthy, and you begin to see that I am a person of my word, and that I do follow through, and I do take responsibility, what happens is you start giving me some change. And so I come back.
Start with the 5.
Chuck, look at that. I love this. Come here, come here. Hey, Chuck. Now, Chuck, I've given him a 5. I've given him a 20. I've given him 50. I even gave him $100. I mean, I gave him some bills. You got me? So when Chuck is now giving me back change, he looks through all the bills and gives me a 5 back. I mean, Chuck, he's very stingy now. He's slowly, he's all right. Here's 5, here's 5. Now let me just stop here for a moment because Chuck and I didn't plan this at all. We're just talking. But I want to tell you something. This is exactly the way it works. Listen very carefully. In the area of character, you lose it a lot quicker than you get it back. And when you start violating issues of integrity with people, and they begin to realize that you've probably manipulated them, violated them, I promise you that as you try to build that trust level back, they'll dole it out $1 at a time. You lose it a lot quicker than you gain it. Does that make sense? Yes. Now, what's happening here in this illustration with Chuck is, if I continue to be trustworthy, Chuck will give me a little bit more change. And you're still going to the lowest dollars, aren't you? Huh? And I say thank you. And by the way, every time he gives me a little bit of change, boy, I've got more change in my pocket. And then we come up with another time, and I'm just showing trustworthiness. I'm showing character. I'm showing integrity. I'm making right decisions. Maybe not even good for me, but good for the company. And I get a little more. And every time, boy, Chuck. And you know what? After a while, I start liking our meetings. Because I'm liking our meetings because I'm gaining change. I had a guy one time tell me, he said, well, I don't like my board meetings. I don't like my meetings when I get the key players together. And I said, it's because you're losing change. Let me tell you something. If you're losing change with people, you don't like meeting with them. But if you're getting change, if you go to a meeting, you're going to get some more bucks, huh? Well, you say, this is going to be a good meeting. See, you're either building in, you're either depositing, or you're withdrawing in this area of solid ground and trust. And so I do well, and I get a little bit more. And this is the 4th time you've given me something. 3 times I had all the money to you, and it's taken, but I do well, and I keep coming back, and finally I get that last piece. Now here's what I want you to see. Here's what I want you to see. You're on solid ground when you walk around your company, or you walk around your department, or your place of business, and your pockets are loaded with change. In fact, if you have to walk around with a limp, why are you limping? Oh, I'm just loaded with change. That's your goal. In fact, the goal of a leader is to increase his or her change in their pocket. In fact, let me say this. Hang on, here we go. You cannot make changes in the organization unless you have change in your pocket. It takes a lot of change in your pocket to make big changes in your company. Isn't that true? But if there's a high integrity level and there's a lot of trust level and the law of solid ground is there, you can make a lot of huge changes. It can be very, very successful, but it takes change in your pocket to make changes in your organization. And I want you just to take a moment and look at a couple of statements I have in your notes. Statements such as, a leader cannot continually break trust with people and continue to influence them. Oh, the questions are huge. Questions such as, do I have change in my pocket? Is my change increasing or decreasing? Do I pass the integrity test? Somebody says, what's the integrity test, John? The integrity test is this. With integrity, the longer I lead, the better it gets. Without integrity, the longer I lead, the worse it becomes. That is so true. The law of solid ground says trust is the foundation of leadership. Law number 7, the law of respect. The law of respect says people naturally follow leaders stronger than themselves. Now, I've got a question I want to ask you, because this law of respect, really has huge implications in your leadership life. Here's the question. And in the studio, while I'm asking my friends in the training tapes, I want to ask you the very same question. How many of you would like to lead more people and a higher quality of people at the same time? Huh? In other words, how many of you would like to have increase your quantity and increase your quality? Now, if you raised your hand, and they all did here, if you raise your hand, I'm here to tell you that the law of respect will teach you how to do it. And the best way that I can illustrate how the law of respect plays into not only leading more people, but leading a higher quality of people, let's go back to the hand illustration I used when I talked to you about the law of the lid. If you remember when I talked to you about the law of the lid, I said, if you're a leadership, if this hand represents my leadership, and let's say it's a 4, and this hand represents my business, so the lid of my leadership will contain or hold down my business. If my leadership is a 4, my business is a 3. You know, it's just not going to go any higher. It's going to be contained under my leadership effectiveness. Now, when I was teaching that law, I was talking about the size of your organization, and that you cannot grow an organization bigger than you are. And that's very true. The law of respect, I'm using the same illustration now. If the law of the lid will not only allow you to grow an organization bigger than you are, it will not allow you to attract people better than you are. Let me explain. If I'm a 4 as a leader, the people I attract to me will basically be 3s, 2s, and 1s. Does that make sense? In other words, when we teach the law of magnetism, which is another law which I will teach later on, when we teach the law of magnetism, the law of magnetism basically says you attract who you are, not who you want. Well, in the law of respect, I'm saying people follow leaders that are strong themselves. So in other words, if I'm a 4 as a leader, I'm not going to attract a lot of 7s and 8s. 7s and 8s aren't going to follow me. And I have a quote in your note this is huge. It says, the more leadership ability a person has, the more quickly he or she recognizes leadership or its lack in others. Now, that is just a huge statement. So let me explain what I mean by that. Haven't you been in a room where perhaps you were a better leader than the person that was leading? And you realized that you were a better leader. I'm not talking about arrogance. I'm not talking about thinking more highly of yourself than you should. It's just the fact that you knew you were a better leader. Now, if you're a 7 as a leader and you happen to be having to follow a 4, you're not going to want to do that. In fact, that's why there's so much frustration in the workplace. Isn't that true? There's frustration in the workplace because you've got people that are perhaps better leaders that are underneath a lesser leader, and it causes all kind of conflict. Now, here's the good news. Let's go back to the illustration I used of the hand again. If I'm a 4 as a leader, and I go from a 5 to a 6 to a 7, in other words, I can learn leadership, and I grow. I learn these laws. I apply them in my life, and over the process of time, I become a better leader. If I go from a 4 to a 7, not only do I increase the quantity of my organization from a 3 to a 4 to a 5 to a 6, I increase the quality of people I attract. All of a sudden, if I'm a 7 as a leader, I'm attracting 6s. Now, think about it. As a 4 of a leader, I was attracting 3s. Now, what I'm saying to you is I've now doubled the quality of a person that I've attracted. And this is huge, and here's why it is. I was doing a couple of years ago a national conference for Chick-fil-A. And during a question and answer period, a person raised his hand, and he asked me this question. He said, John, how do I find leaders? Find potential leaders. He said, I want to find potential leaders for my organization. And when he said, how do I find potential leaders? I looked at him and I said, you have to know what they look like. But let me say something else. You can't attract potential leaders if you're not a leader yourself. Like begets like. So in this law of respect, what I'm saying to you is, as you grow as a leader, you're not only going to increase the quantity as far as the size of your company, you're going to increase the quality, the kind of people that you attract to it. And here's why. People don't follow people by accident, and people don't follow people that are not good leaders. Let me explain it to you this way. When people respect you as a person, they admire you. And it's wonderful to be admired. When people respect you as a friend, they love you. But when people respect you as a leader, they follow you. I remember several years ago I did a lesson called RESPECT. Tell me what you think of me now. I didn't sing or dance. But basically I was trying to share with people how important it is to have respect. Now what I want you to understand is respect is not a given. It's earned. In fact, if you think back at the law of influence, when I taught you about the 5 levels of influence, I taught you that the highest level was the personhood level, and the key word there was respect. People follow you because you've done so well with so many for so long that you've absolutely gained their respect. Now, you have to gain respect. It's not a given. It's something that has to be earned. So in your notes, let me share with you how to earn respect, how to gain respect from other people as a leader. Number 1, have a respect for other people. It's very important for you as a leader to be respectful of other people. The best way I can explain it is I observe leadership and observe leaders all the time. And I mark a man or a woman, I mark a leader if they don't respect their people. For example, I think it's a character flaw. For example, if I'm leading and you happen to be the people that I'm leading, you happen to be my people, I think I look for a leader to have respect for the people with them that, quote, this is not a good phrase, but I'm going to just use it to illustrate, people that are under them. Here's what I want you to understand. When a leader powers up on people beneath them, or takes advantage of people beneath them, or manipulates people beneath them, or doesn't respect people beneath them, I think it's a huge character flaw. In other words, when you have power on people and you misuse that power, I think you have violated your leadership. Does that make sense? And it's amazing how a person behaves, quote, when they can get by with it. Did you get that? And when a leader can, quote, get by with treating people unkindly or kind of, quote, running over them or taking advantage of them, whenever I see that happen, I always look at that leader and I realize that they have a character flaw. Because the best way to get respect from other people is to give respect to people. And the moment that you and I do that, then respect begins to be returned to us. So step number 1, I suppose, really has nothing to do with leadership. It has to do with the golden rule. It has to do with respecting other people. The second way to gain respect is by courage. I have found that in the area of leadership, people will respect you when you make a courageous decision. And I define a courageous decision this. A courageous decision is one that I make because it's right, not because it has a probability of passing, or not because it benefits me. It's just a right decision. That's courage. The ability to be courageous and step out and make decisions that benefit your company but don't benefit you. Benefit your people but don't benefit you. That's a courageous decision. Thirdly, I think that you earn respect by success. People want to follow successful people. Let me put it this way. Have you ever known somebody who said, I'm just looking for a leader? Have you found a leader that just fails a lot? Man, I would love to. Are you a leader that messes up? Do you just kind of get into dead-end streets and kind of blow yourself out of the water because, boy, could I attach myself to you? No. I've never known a person who said, boy, if I could just have a coach that's a bad coach. You know what I'm saying? Boy, if our team could just get a coach that loses all the time, that would be huge for us. No, you got to have success because people want to go to the top and they want to get with people who can take them to the top. So if you want respect, you've got to get some success under your belt. Number 4, consistency. Just the ability to keep on keeping on and day in, day out be the same. Consistency is huge because people want to follow somebody that they not only trust, they want to follow somebody that's dependable. Number 5, you gain respect when you add value to others. Oh, I love that. The ability to add value to others, to come alongside of them and really take them to a level that they would not go on their own. That gives you respect. And finally, number 6, just pure leadership ability. The ability to lead people effectively is absolutely important in gaining respect. Now, let me just close this law of respect by sharing with you that there are two what I call kind of like acid tests of respect. In other words, when people come to me and they say, John, do you think I have the respect of people around me as a leader? There are two ways that I can always look. I can look at you, I can look at myself, I can look at anybody in a leadership position, and I can tell you how you can know if you have the respect of your people, and you can go to the bank on these two things. The first test of respect is the response of people when you ask for commitment. They will only commit if they respect you. I have watched it happen time and time again. When you have a group of people and they don't make the commitment necessary, it's almost always a lack of respect to the leader. And the second area, the second test of respect, is the response of people when the leader asks them to change. You show me a group of people that will make big commitments and major changes. I will show you a group of people that highly respects their leader, because people will not make commitment and not make changes unless they really respect a leader. You don't do that for somebody you don't. You don't make changes. You don't make commitments for somebody that you don't respect. So when somebody comes to me as a leader and says, John, do you think my people respect me? I ask them this very simple question. Do you find the people that work with you, do they make commitments, major commitments, and do they make major changes for the organization to be successful? If so, they respect you as a leader.